story of being adopted, the experience of giving up one of her children to adoption, and 2 stories of reunion. It's a story that raises lots of questions, and Anne is a remarkable woman in terms of her fortitude and resilience. During the recording, we had a few internet glitches. Now, they're few and far between, and they're just pretty minor, so hopefully they won't detract from your listening experience. As always, if you've experience of adoption, fostering or special guardianship from any perspective, personal or professional, and would like to share that on the podcast, please get in touch through the Facebook page, the app formerly known as Twitter, or you can email us at anfpodcast@gmail.com.
So my name is Peshka, and I live in the U.S. in the state of Florida. And I'm a mother of 3 children and also a small little dog. I own my own business, and I love to travel.
Excellent. So you got in touch with me in terms of wanting to share a bit about your story. And so if you're comfortable to, if you could start at the beginning and tell me, your origin story, what you know of it.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. So I was born in Tampa, Florida, and I was adopted by a couple that was told they could never have children. They were in the U.S. military, were trying to have a family and weren't able to. So they adopted me from a Catholic orphanage. I was a few months old. And then about a year and a half later, they went to the same orphanage and adopted my sister. So no biological relation. They just adopted another child. And then we were transferred to the state of Michigan, where we adopted my brother. And so he's 4 years younger than me. So then all of a sudden they had 5 natural children in a row. And they were all born in different states, and one was even born in Japan. So now all of a sudden I went from being a single child to the oldest of 8 living all over the country. Right. So it was quite busy in my household.
Yeah. So in terms of growing up as an adoptee and, moving around like military families often do, what did that mean to you as a little girl?
Well, it was quite interesting because I became a professional diaper changer and macaroni and cheese and hot dog chef at the age of like 4 or 5 years old. So changing diapers very proficiently, doing laundry for 10 people, doing dishes. So the adoption piece, it was interesting. My parents were very open talking about adoption, and that the first 3 of us were chosen. And then they had the 5 natural children. The first 3, we obviously look dramatically different from each other. And then the 5 natural look exactly the same. Very, very close with all of my siblings. Life was great with my siblings. But you also, as an adoptee, you realize that there's differences. I mean, not only was I tall and blonde and nobody else was, you realize that you weren't ever really, truly wanted. I would lay there and I would think of the universe, and I would, imagine, what my birth parents were thinking, and, what was it like when they gave me away? Did they know where I was going to go? And then why and how did I end up with the family that I ended up with? I could have been adopted by anybody. I was a couple of months old. I was healthy. I was in an orphanage in Tampa. I mean, there was no reason why I couldn't have been adopted by anybody else. So the couple that did get me, it just used to baffle me. Like, how did I end up here? How did I end up in charge of 7 younger siblings? My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but I really, truly was her right hand. And I used to tease her that, that was a good move, adopting a girl first. You might as well adopt somebody that could help you cook and clean and change diapers and raise babies. And I was 13 years old when my youngest sibling was born. So that's all I did my entire life, was take care of kids. So that was my start.
And was that a negative? Was that something your parents were aware of, that kind of that internal questioning, or was that something that was you said they were open about it, but was it an open conversation, or was it just an acceptable conversation?
I think it was more of an acceptable. I think that as adoptive parents, they weren't quite sure how to direct their conversation. So it was more of a matter of fact. We chose you, instead of like, well, we couldn't have kids and we ended up with you. It was more like, and if you ever did decide to want to find your birth family, we will help you. But it was never really, I think also I was born in 66. So back then in the 70s and especially the 80s when I was really, that's when I began my search. Hiring private investigators. That was pre-internet. That was really kind of a time and space where nobody really knew how or where to look.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think they dealt with adoption the best that they could. It was a viable option for them to have a family. Interesting enough, they weren't model parents. I mean, I look back on it now and decades of therapy later, and I realized that, they brought to the table the tools that they had, and they did the
Yeah.
very best that they could. I don't know that the screening process with adoption has changed. I don't really know how you could possibly screen what's inside of someone's heart.
Mhm.
But not everybody should be an adoptive parent.
Yeah. But I'm sort of thinking culturally in, like you say, this late 60s and early 70s, that adoption was in a very different place culturally then, and people sort of, even people not telling their children, or
Mhm.
sort of the advice from a lot of agencies was just go away and don't talk about it. And so would you, I mean, I don't want to kind of like turn them into saviors. I don't know them. But would you, can you look back and kind of go, well, actually that does feel quite progressive given the time and the culture around adoption in the US? Or was it
You know
just
what?
matter of fact?
I think it was applicable to the day and the time and the age that we were in. I mean, we had, I can't say if it was a surplus or of babies or not, but a couple that comes forward that's in the US Air Force, I can't imagine there'd be much vetting going on. I mean, they're
Yeah.
making great money. They're stable. He's at least passed a background check. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was like, oh, this is going to be a great couple. They've got a great job. They've got the ability and the means. And, so it made great sense. Looking back, I can also see the way that their extended families dealt with it. They weren't used to it. They weren't sure what it meant. I mean, we were introduced as my dad's name was Joe. So his family would say, well, these are Joe's children, meaning the natural five, and these are the other ones. So it was quite obviously segregated within the family. Now, we were raised solidly enough as siblings to feel just as equal to each other. So all of us siblings are exceptionally close.
Hmm.
And I really attribute that to the fact that, my parents did make it very open. You all are wanted. You all are here because we want you here. But it doesn't take away that, as an adoptee, I think an adoptee, and I can only speak for myself, you do always wonder why. And, the magic
Hmm.
of the universe is I ended up here and I could have been anywhere.
Yeah.
It was unfortunate that I was adopted into a family of dysfunction. At the time, I thought it was very, unfortunate. I look back now and I realize it was a blessing. It was a part of me that without having such great dysfunction, I wouldn't be who I am today. So I embrace it and I'm grateful for it. But as a child and as a young adult, that's not how it feels.
Yeah.
It's you never belong. You never belong. No matter what, you never belong. You look different. You are different. You never belong.
Hmm. And it's interesting you saying you teasing your mum about your, you adopted me. And was there a sort of a sort of a little seed of truth in that for you thinking, actually, did you? Was this the plan?
I don't think that it really was, but it was an absolutely brilliant move. I don't think they realized they were going to be blessed with as many children as they
Yeah.
were. But it was really brilliant. That also came with a lot of resentment. There was a lot of anger and resentment. I mean, as a child, I wanted to go play with my friends.
Yeah.
I never played with toys. I never had a doll. I had a real life baby. When I went to school for show and tell, I got to bring my little brother. And, I was just so uber excited about that. Like, I didn't have the childhood that most children have.
Yeah.
Mine was wrought with all kinds of responsibility And, I mean, things that I had to do. It was a lot of pressure. So a lot of resentment came from that. I never thought I would ever have kids because of it.
Right. So, I mean, there's an awful lot to unpick there. We could do a whole podcast just on your childhood. But
Yeah.
if it's okay, moving you on then into adolescence and um, into young adulthood, you talked about how your parents had they'd said, it's totally fine for you to go and look. And so, um, what started the ball rolling in terms of you then making that step to go and look for children,
I
your
think it
parents?
was, yeah, it really was probably spurred on. I always had this desire, and I used to visualize and imagine that my parents were somebody important, probably like any child in a fairy tale model. But once I had my oldest child, I was 19 when I had him. And when he was 3 years old, I ended up getting pregnant again and knew I was not in a good space. I had a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol was around my life at that point, and I was having a struggle taking care of a 3-year-old. So I ended up pregnant, not intentionally, and decided to place that baby for adoption. And it was at that point that I realized two things happened. One, crazy enough, one would think that because I was adopted into dysfunction, that I may be concerned he would be placed into dysfunction. And the weirdest thing and the most peaceful thing that happened was I knew innately that I was going to find him a home and place him into the arms of a family that would raise him way better than I could. And he was going to actually have an honest, really good start to life, unlike my 3-year-old who was kind of stuck with me as a dysfunctional parent at the time. So it
Uh,
was shortly after. My middle son's name is Nathan, my oldest son's name is Bill. So when Nathan was born, I named him after my father, who was dying of cancer at the time. And although there was a lot of abuse with my father, it was still, he was my father and the only one that I knew. So it was kind of amends in a strange way that I went to him on his deathbed and I said, I'm having a child. I'm going to place him for adoption and I'm going to name him after you. And I went on to choose the family that Nathan would be adopted into without knowing what they looked like. So I wanted non identifying information, and I didn't want them to ever see me and look over their shoulder. I wanted them to adopt him immediately and know beyond a shadow of a doubt he was their child. So I had 5 families to choose from. And as soon as I read the bio for his family that he ended up with, I knew it was immediate. I knew exactly this was the family he would go to. Placed him for adoption. My 3-year-old and I went on. That was my catalyst. That was the change I needed in my life to move
hmm.
forward and clean myself up, so to speak. So I worked 3 jobs. We went from living in a shelter to getting our, feet on the ground. And it was at that point that I really began my search for my birth parents. So, and that began by hiring private investigators.
I, Firstly, wow, there's a lot to unpick there. Thank you.
A
A
little bit.
question, just a little bit, yeah. And I'm sort of intrigued by that journey into what sounds like quite a chaotic, quite problematic lifestyle. And um, what do you think? Often people can look and go, "Oh, well, early adversity and trauma and your primal wound." We can unpick a whole range of things that then childhood can be fairly okay, but then in young adulthood it sort of explodes. And was it a sense of all of this stuff, or was it just circumstances? Was it bad luck? Was there other stuff going on in terms of what kind of got you to this really sounds like a really difficult place?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it was cumulative. I remember. So it was incestuous. My father was abusive to me. Probably the age of 4 was my earliest memory. So being raised with that trauma is very, very difficult to work through, especially as a child. You have no way, you have no tools to work through that as a child. So you become very much, and then being an adoptee on top of it, you're very much like, why am I even here? Why was I even born? So I went through a lot of suicidal tendencies, a couple of attempts into drugs, into alcohol, had my first son. Now here I am with the second one. I'm a complete train wreck.
Yeah.
So it was really, there was a lot of things that led up to it my entire life, right up to that moment. It pretty much probably would be, I guess, if you ever were to say, did I have a bottom? I can't say that Nathan was the bottom. He was the most beautiful, difficult thing that ever happened to me. And it really was what changed the trajectory of my life. It was at that point that I realized, wow, I'm blessed enough to be able to not only have one child, and I don't know why God would do that. Why would he trust me? Doesn't he know who I am? He's actually giving me a baby. And then to be blessed again was when I knew, you know what, maybe I am worth recycling.
Mm.
And that's exactly what I began to do, was to recycle the trauma into the better parts of me. And it's taken that long. And
Yeah.
it was a beautiful thing. I can't say it was easy, because it wasn't. It
Oh,
was extremely difficult. And I used all the tools that I could. I reached out in any way that I could: therapists, books, podcasts, you name it. Of course, now we're in a world now where it's much easier.
mm.
We didn't have much in the way of podcasts back then. We had books. That was
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, a very different sort of landscape. But I mean, what you've described
Hmm.
there, and I know you've covered an awful lot of ground again, and every sort of every sentence could be a podcast in of itself. But your experience of abuse as a child,
Yeah.
and then that sort of spilling into adulthood, all all through the lens of being an adoptee. Um, the question that sort of sprung to mind was at the very beginning. You said, being an adoptee is to not be wanted. But then for you
Hmm.
to be in a position where you place a child for adoption, that those two things seem totally incompatible, or or do they totally align? That because you clearly loved your child, you loved your son, but didn't
It's
feel,
amazing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it really is amazing. And I also, I mean, that experience with Nathan, and perhaps this is coming from an adoptee, but when I knew that I was going to place Nathan for adoption, his father did not see things the way that I did. And he threatened that if I did place him for adoption, he would hunt me down and that would be it. So I had to go into hiding. I had to have a fake name. And when I did place Nathan for adoption, it was very important to me that during the relinquishment period, which was 3 days in that state, that he have a bond with someone. And I really do believe that adoptees, that's one of the difficult parts of being an adoptee, is that when a child is born, they need that heartbeat, the pulse. They need a mother, whether it's the one of the womb that they were raised in,
Mhm.
or it's somebody they need to bond immediately. So although I had a security guard that accompanied me whenever I went to go see Nathan in the nursery, they kept him over there for safety purposes. Um, I had to wait for the security guard to show up before I could go over and nurse him. And that to me was not fair. It was not right. And the hospital was not used to dealing with birth mothers like me. They typically, back then, Nathan was born in 88. And the majority of women who place their children, and I'm not sure if it's the same today, but they kind of hand over the baby. Here you go. Maybe give a quick look, quick kiss, and the baby's off and running. I did not want to be that mother. I did not want him to spend 3 days in a nursery with different strangers handling him. I wanted him to bond with somebody, and that was me. So for 3 days, I was going to hold that baby, change his diaper, and nurse him. So after the first day, when I realized I was going to have to be at the mercy of the security guard schedule, I just decided to get myself over to that wing of the hospital, and I would just sit in the waiting room and I would take care of my son. And it was very difficult for the staff to accept that they had a birth mother who wanted to do that. It probably wasn't the norm. Looking back on it now, I'm sure it wasn't. Um, but that was super, super important that he not feel like he was like off in the middle of nowhere as an infant with not that bond.
Mm.
So it was shortly after I placed him for adoption that the hospital called me back and asked me to be a part of a symposium and do some training for their healthcare workers, and kind of say, hey, listen, I want you to be aware every birth mother is going to be different, and we all need to be respected for the differences that we are.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was just really important to me, because on day 3, when I signed that he was going to his new mom and dad, and I wrote them a letter. I'm like, I truly, please take my word. Don't ever have any doubt. Even though it's a legal document, I don't want you to go to bed at night wondering, I don't want you to look in the rearview mirror and wonder if you're in a Lifetime movie and there's a birth mother. Like, I please know that he is your baby. And that was so important to me. And being able to have that dialogue with them via letters and then later on a phone call after he was a week old was so important to me.
Yeah, like you said, this sort of the book ending of this experience, you as being a child to a young woman. I guess by then you're early 20s, aren't you?
Right,
And also, like you said at the beginning, that your parents went to an orphanage and picked you up,
right.
and so that then makes you question your experience of had you been just left, and you said you were a month old. Did you say that?
I was about 3 months old. My name was Sheila. The nun's name was Sheila. So I had to,
Yeah.
yeah, give a different name, which Nathan ended up with a different name too. It's like for 3 months, I was with, I don't know how many hands held me.
And that, yeah, so as much as I'm sure if you could wave a magic wand and your circumstances would have been different and all of that, but you did everything in your powers to kind of ensure that, like you say, that those 3 months that, where that I'm sure there's a million questions about those 3 months
Yeah,
that you then, that there was a really clear narrative in terms of your
right,
son.
right.
So I can kind of understand that then the next question is, so what is my story? That that
Hmm.
sort of makes sense to me. So I mean, there's so much in that, and the experience of giving a child up must kind of run deep for you.
Hmm.
What do you do the next day? How do you pick yourself up from that?
It was definitely weird. I mean, I was placed in a home. A couple let me live in their house until I delivered Nathan, and it was clear that once he was delivered and once I was out of the hospital, I think I had 3 days or something at their home, and then I had to move on. And that was when my oldest son and I, so my oldest son was part of this pregnancy, and he knew that mommy was going to have a baby and he was going to go to a new mommy and daddy. So, as best you can explain to a 3 year old, that's extremely difficult. And then also reaffirm to him that you're not going to go too. So in a 3 year old mindset, okay, mommy's giving that baby away. Where am I going? So it was really, I had
Mm.
to really be careful. And I had some great social workers that worked with me on that to make sure that I was delivering that message to him in a solid way. So now we went from delivering Nathan to going into the homeless system again. So we ended up in like a homeless shelter where I just began. It was really my whole path was, whether you call it blessing, universe, however you believe, or just good luck. I was able to secure several jobs, and I worked like 3 jobs for a few months and was able to begin renting a couch and then secure an apartment within a few months. It probably only took me 3 or 4 months to be able to get a home for us. And I just started building myself up from there. I mean, it was really just it was almost like going from like caterpillar status to all of a sudden, wow, I'm actually worthy and I can do this and I can be a mom. So it was really it was very quick.
It seems like when we think about the moment of you giving a child up, seems like an absolute pivotal moment in changing your trajectory in life. And
Yeah.
without that, who knows where you may have gone. So you mentioned that was then the one of the catalysts for you deciding to start to look for you kind of your own parents, your biological parents, and finding out about your story. So how do you pick that up in a sort of pre-internet world?
Well, I wanted to, I think it began with realizing that Nathan may grow up not really realizing what his birth mother felt. I was trusting that his adopted parents, my
Right.
criteria for them was that he always be raised knowing he was loved and that he was placed with that in mind. That it not be hidden from him. I didn't want him to not know he was adopted. Of course, I had no control over that. But I think as an adoptee, you always wonder why and where and who, like where do I fit, where did I come from? Those are such huge innate questions. So as I began my journey, I made sure to keep the dialogue open with Nathan's parents that if I were ever to move, or they ever needed to reach me, they always could through the agency. And I wanted that to be available to them because I knew nothing about my medical history. I knew nothing about me. I couldn't pass that on to Nathan. He also was going to know nothing about himself or his father. There was zero history information. So I went through the phone book actually and hired a private investigator company that were supposed to help me. And you learn, through the process. You save up so much money, you spend it,
Yeah.
and you realize that I probably could have done that on my own. But back then it was called the Soundex Registry. And that was a free, because I came from Florida and because I came from a Catholic orphanage, that was the brick wall. Florida was open, brick wall was Catholic. So I was
Right.
getting absolutely nowhere. I was 25 when I began my search, officially began my search. I was not getting anywhere. I didn't get anywhere for decades. I did find a woman who in Florida was willing to search for me, and she must have had access to public records and medical records that she was not supposed to. So she got me some really cool information, but no name. So although I was able to find out that my birth mother was also in the Air Force, that still wasn't going to help me. I, at that point, figured my adoptive parents knew who she was and they weren't really telling me. They named
Right.
me Anne Marie, Anne-Marie, and they told me they named me after twins that they knew. The woman that was seeking my birth mother found out she was a twin. So I swore my parents knew who she was and they
Yeah.
just weren't telling me. That turned out to not be the case. But now we fast forward and then these genetic testings come out. So ancestry.com was the very first one that I did. Heritage followed after that. And then I think it was in 2013, I discovered 23andMe. And so I took that one. So now I'm out there everywhere. I am like doing anything I can to try to find somebody that looks like me even. And in 2018, I got an email from 23andMe that said, we've found a match. So I'm thinking it's birth family. And I read the email and it's actually to my birth son, which I was not looking for.
Right.
So I'm thinking, oh my God, he's going to think I'm stalking him. I didn't want him to feel like I was trying to find him. So my very first message to him was, if you were born on this date, I might be your birth mother. And I was not looking for you.
Yeah.
So which now I look at it, sounds very cold, but he wrote back to me and said, that is actually me. And I was also not looking for you. So here we are both going, okay, so for 9 months, we talked through text. He was looking for medical information when he found me. So we had some great conversations via text for 9 months. And then I finally, I told him I will be on a plane in an hour. This is going to be led by you. I mean, this is your story and I will respect it however you'd like it to unfold. I'm okay with. So if you want to meet me, I love that. If you don't, I'm okay with that too. And we did end up meeting. I did end up flying out there, and that was just unbelievable.
Yeah. And especially from that position of you sort of, was that even in your mind, or had you always sort of anticipated that that was something that was not going to happen? Or
I think I had, when I placed him for adoption, I knew that I may never see him again.
yeah.
So I was honoring that. It was his story. It was not mine. And I was really respectful of however he felt about me, that I would be okay with. So, and I was also very trusting that he had a good life.
Yeah.
So that was something that, in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh my God, like, all right, so how is he? You know what I mean? Like, and it was, but I knew in my heart the entire time that he was almost 30 years old when we found each other. He was 2 weeks shy of his 30th birthday. So 3 decades had gone by since I gave birth.
Yeah.
And anything could have happened. But yeah, I never had a doubt. I never had a doubt that he was good.
And I mean, how is that relationship now? Of people often talk about them being, people have such varying experiences of sort of reconnecting with their children, and vice, children with parents as well. So is it what you anticipated, or is it just something sort of What is it? What does
It's
that look
magic.
like? Is it?
It's absolutely pure magic. It from the moment that I met him, I mean, I flew out. He was living on the other side of the country in Utah, and we arranged to meet at a restaurant together. And I got there like 45 minutes early, which is my MO, especially if I'm super uber nervous and I wanted
Yeah.
to position myself just right. And I'm like, oh, I'm probably gonna cry, and I want to have tissue and I want to be prepared. And when I was walking across the parking lot, I look over and there he is walking across the parking lot too, both of us early. So it really just completely broke the ice. We both started laughing. There was no, crazy tears or anything. It was both a great connection, and we realized immediately so many similarities. And I was just an open book. I told him anything you'd like to know. I didn't hold back. It was like, this is where I was when I had
Yeah.
you. This was my decision. And I'm so sorry I don't know any information about your father. But I was really just very upfront and honest. And it was really, really good. We had, dialogue like that for a couple of years. And he did finally come to visit me in Florida and asked if I'm in real estate. So he asked me if I would send him some houses that were for sale just in case he ever wanted to buy one. And in the meantime, I ended up putting in an offer on a house, and I wasn't quite sure if I was newly divorced, and I wasn't sure if I was making the right decision. So I went to bed one night and I said, yeah, all right, universe, if this is the house I'm supposed to buy, just give me a sign, just so I know. And the next day, my son Nathan called me and he said, hey, I like this house you sent me. Can you go look at it for me? Long story short, I sold him a house and we both closed at the same day, a mile apart. So he
Right.
now lives right down the road from me with his family. It's magic.
Yeah. And I'm conscious that in the midst of all that is there's a two parents to Nathan. And is that a relationship is that how is that working? Is it working, or is it just kind of not existing?
Do you mean Nathan's parents?
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing.
Right.
It's like my heart is so full. Yeah. There's there's only one emotion that gets me, and it's gratitude.
Mhm.
Okay. I didn't see that coming. Um, but being able to meet his mom was a dream.
Mhm.
It was a dream. And wow, I'm so sorry to be emotional like that, but
Please.
it's a really big deal.
Mm.
So when I got a chance to meet her, I flew to where he had been raised, and I met his mom at a restaurant with him, and she was super nervous to meet me.
Yeah.
I was super excited. It was like I was meeting like Oprah, like it was like the biggest moment in my life.
Mhm.
And then we went back to her house and showing me baby pictures and showing me all his little things when he was a little kid. It was huge. So now his family comes to Florida to visit. And just recently, they came to visit and they invited me. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's so huge. There's so much love around it. Um, wow. So they invited me to spend the day on the beach. And we just sat there talking. And it was so nice because she had so many questions for me that she had been afraid to ask. What was it like? What were you going through? What were you
Mm.
thinking? And it was really, really just so natural to be able to sit there with her. And, the kids are playing on the beach and we're just talking about, Nathan's life. I mean, he's sitting there laughing, rolling his eyes in his head, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. But his parents are just truly magical. I was so blessed, so blessed. And so was he. He's got
So
an amazing, wonderful family.
so that sounds like like you say, an unexpected blessing, and clearly, why wouldn't you be emotional about that? It sounds like an
Huge. Yeah.
outcome that was, if you turn back to 1988, that would be
Yeah.
that would be the best possible outcome,
Oh,
even if
yeah.
and it's kind of come to pass. So back to your search. So yeah. Um, so you got slightly sidetracked by this, I'm sure, for a while, but in the meantime, you're still looking for your biological mum and father
Yeah.
potentially. So how did that progress?
All right. So I found Nathan April of 2018. Um, 10 months later, I was on my way to go visit him in Utah. I was in Atlanta making a connecting flight when I got a phone call from a match on 23andMe. She was a first cousin, and she called and said, I know who your birth parents are. And that happened as I'm in one of the busiest airports on the planet. And I'm standing there completely blown away. I didn't realize they would even still be alive because they were
Mm.
older when they had me. My non identifying information had my father as 34 and my mother 26 when they gave birth. I'm in my 50s at this point, and I get this phone call. So I find out that my birth parents were still alive. They had they were not married when they were pregnant with me. So they decided to place me for adoption. They were living in Florida, in Jacksonville. My mother had been in the military, so the search was correct. She was a twin, so that was correct. But what happened is they ended up deciding to put me up for adoption. My mother drove across the state, delivered me in Tampa, and stayed in a rooming house and placed me for adoption. That was all she knew. And then she was gone. So she didn't have any kind of relation with me. I don't even think that she saw me. And then 2 years later, when they decided to get married, they went back to get me. And the orphanage told them I was long gone. So they ended up getting married. They had two other children. So I had two biological sisters. And I can only imagine that hanging in the back of their head. Like, we placed this baby in the orphanage, we go back to get her, and she's long gone. And, and now, so they end up staying married for a number of years until my youngest sister was finished with school, and then they got divorced. But they were both, I got that phone call, and they're both alive and well. They're living in Florida. And, I can have them call you if you want. And I'm just sitting there. I now miss my connecting flight. I have no idea where I am. I'm sitting on the floor trying to ground myself, realizing that I've got birth parents that want to talk to me. I don't even know how to process this.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, on a normal day, that's a lot of information to process. But as you say, on that route journey to meet your biological son, that's like information overload, isn't it? So, um, did you so tell me about that meeting then. I mean, because but comparing the two, the comparison of meeting your child versus the comparison of meeting your parents, was it similar feelings, or was it comparable?
It was, we ended up talking on the phone, and my mother they had never told anybody I existed. So they needed to let their daughters know that, hey, you have a big sister. So it took about a month before we met in
Mm.
person. They had to go through that, transition. It went really well. So we arranged to meet in a hotel lobby in Jacksonville. And oddly enough, I had just moved to Florida the previous year. I didn't even live anywhere near Florida. So this was all strange. All of a sudden I moved here, and now I find them in the right down the road. So I was absolutely scared to death on how I was going to react. I was so
Mm.
excited and overwhelmed. I came off the elevator and went to walk into the room where they were, and I couldn't breathe. So when I finally come into the room and one of my sisters stood up and was smiling, and I saw that she looked like me, I lost it, because nobody on this planet has ever looked like me. I'm the mom of three boys. None of them really look like me. They're boys.
Mm.
So now I'm looking at this girl going, holy crap, she looks like me. And it was just so overwhelming. So I, met both my parents and my two sisters, and we sat there, and I very quickly realized I am nothing like. I was the only one emotional. None of them got emotional. I'm tall. I look like them, but I don't. I'm completely different. And I am so grateful that I was placed for adoption, even though my story is one of, trauma and dysfunction. My birth family is lovely. They're wonderful people, but I realize all the beauty in the trauma by recycling everything that happened to me as a person, turning into the person that I am today. I'm truly blessed. And to be able to know where I came from is fascinating. It's been great.
I mean, yeah, you say that, but I'm sort of listening this information first time, so I didn't know any of that stuff. And part of me sort of thinks, if I was, anyone listening to this will maybe feel the same, is that sounds like a very processed perspective in the sense that it's taken time to get there. Um, and I just sort of feel like that there's so many ifs and buts. Like you say, right now you're in a position where you can kind of accept that and you can embrace it and
Mhm.
you can be thankful for who you are today. But it feels like a rough road to where you are today.
It was, I think the one thing that I really wanted to convey to them, and the whole time through my journey of searching, I never had false expectations. I never expected somebody to love me, and I was going to be okay if they didn't. So I
Yeah.
never was concerned. I'm sure that there's that piece of me that had I been rejected, initially, that I might have been like, wow, okay. But I knew that I had enough strength in myself that I would be able to look at it and say, wow, what happened to them? Instead of, what, I'm no good. So I already had that strength going on. And I think
Yeah.
that one of the things that I was really, really careful of is I knew that being in their 80s and 90s, that they were going to feel such guilt, especially because they went back to get me. So I was really, really careful to make sure they knew they were absolute rock stars. And what they did was the most difficult thing at a time in their
Mhm.
lives when it was not looked upon as heroic. Being a birth mother was not heroic in the 60s. That was
Yeah.
something to be, you know what I mean?
A
I mean,
shame.
it's
Yeah.
really exactly, exactly. So I wanted to, and nobody knew about me. So now here they are in a position where their daughters knew, but now they have friends and family that are going to go like, you did what?
Yeah.
So I really wanted to convey to them, be so proud of you. Be so proud of you for making a decision that was very, very difficult that few people would be able to do. It takes a lot to be a birth mom. It's not something that should be taken lightly. So my mother was they're both very religious, and she was very concerned what her church folks would think of her. And I really built her up, by saying, listen, I know that you're going to relate. Somebody is going to want to hear your story because you're going to help them. You are going to reiterate
Mm.
all the doubts that you have no idea how magical you are. And they did end up going out and sharing their story with people. It was all over Facebook. It was a really cool thing for them. And I know it was difficult for them to tell their family, oh, all right, so we have another daughter, and it was difficult for them to introduce me as like, because people question, well, where has she been for 50 something years? Why'd you get rid of her?
Yeah. Of
It's
course.
really kind of funny. And it once again goes back into the term that I use a lot, and that's recycled. And it's really like all of the beauty that you have recycled has turned into me, and so on and so forth. And it's like taking those parts of ourselves that are very difficult, and turning them into the better parts of you. And it's been a journey. I mean, it was very difficult for my sisters to all of a sudden realize, oh, you have
Yeah.
another one. That's not easy. That's not easy to, and to try to blend it and become something that has never been there is also very difficult.
Mm. I mean, it's there's so many parts of it that in of them, each one of in of themselves is a remarkable story. And so if it
Hmm.
leaves you now, in your sort of late 50s, thinking about the future, and so you're speaking out about this now, I guess, and you're sharing your story, and I think you're planning to share it in lots of different ways. And what
Right.
what inspired that? What's the kind of the drive behind that?
It's always been passionate to me to share my story, and I've always been so open. I love my story. I embrace my story. But I think what is finally, I've gotten to a place in my life where I know that if I had had somebody like me in my corner as a young birth mother, I would have probably not felt so alone. I think that knowing that there are other women that have gone through, traumatic and incestuous childhoods, can also, you have that question mark as a parent. What am I like? How am I doing? Being able to relate to somebody that has, gone through that process and it's always a journey, right? Everything is still a journey. But I decided to write my book and to begin doing more speaking engagements on these topics because they're the things that we need to talk about, and that nobody should ever feel disconnected or that they are all alone and that nobody will understand how I feel. I mean, although I can't understand another birth mother, I can understand the parts that you go through. Her journey is different than mine, but a birth mom is a really sensitive topic, and that's
Hmm.
something, and same with being an adoptee. I mean, there's always so much that goes along with that, and there's no right and there's no wrong. There's always going to be people that will question, oh, is the adopted child damaged? That's, I hear that a lot, and that's something I'm pretty emphatic about. Are we not all brought into this world as perfection, and then as life and our environment kicks in, do we all collectively accumulate a little damage?
Hmm.
Perhaps not intentionally, of course, but it's just something that I think is really, really important that we talk more about, and that we
Yeah.
become very vocal and open to, because everybody's journey is different and it should be honored.
Yeah. Well, and it's been absolutely fascinating and and a total pleasure to speak to you today. And you've really given me a lot of food for thought. And I think there's lots of elements of your story that really sort of there's so much symmetry, and there's all of these peculiar sort of narratives that are woven through your story, that and you've articulated them so well. So I want to thank you so much for coming on. And have you got a website that where people can look, and what's the name of your book?
The name of my book is going to be titled Recycled. Taking the traumatic parts of you and turning them into the most beautiful. That is the name of my book. And I currently do not have a website, unfortunately, but it
Right.
will be, and Peshka Recycled will be the name of my website.
Excellent. Well, we'll put up a pretend link, and then eventually in the future people can click
Thank
it, and
you.
it'll get them to you. And it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, and I wish you well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.